Welcome to the Howie and Beastmode podcast, where we discuss all things business, including growth, strategy, and execution, as well as personal and professional development. Let's join Howie and Beastmode in conversation.
Well, thanks everybody for joining the Gateway Business Group. Today, we're so excited to have you. We're going to be talking about meaningful metrics. We are going to be talking about meaningful employee metrics as well as servant leadership for this particular Gateway group. So just sit back and get ready to interact with us on this if you're watching the recording. But obviously, we've got some good folks live here. And so, yeah, thanks for joining the group. So, Jordan, do you want to maybe lay a foundation with some scriptures first?
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay. Why don't you make me the presenter? Maybe I already am, I don't know.
Yep, you're good to go.
Okay, cool. So I will share my browser, and I'll just share my whole screen. Okay. So, who would like to read this first one? Justin, you want to read it?
Planted, Apollos watered, but God gave the growth. So neither he who plants nor he who waters is anything, but only God who gives the growth. He who plants and he who waters are one, and each will receive his wages according to his labor. For we are God's fellow workers. You are God's field, God's building.
Yep. I think just a comment that I would make about this, and you guys can make a comment as well, but if you talk about employee metrics, metrics in your business around your team members, your employees, that kind of thing, and if you talk about also servant leadership along with that, I think what spoke to me out of this, and Jordan can give a comment or any of you guys can, but that, Paul planted and Apollos watered, so there's different roles that they played, and also that that it's of course God who gives the growth. So there's a role that each one of us plays in business or in ministry to help build people, because this growth he's talking about is building people. And I know, Jordan, you're really passionate about that topic of building people.
Yeah, this is one of my favorite verses. I just love the fact that because they were never there at the same time, Apollos and Paul. But I mean, so if I'm Paul and I'm a business owner, I have the responsibility to grow this person, right? But then I may pass them off to somebody else like Apollos, and in this instance, Apollos was getting the quote unquote salvations. He was getting the end result that people would claim as the glory or whatever. But Paul is saying, hey man, I did just the same amount of work. He did work, but ultimately God's the one who's received all of it. And so that's really a motto that we should have whenever we have people underneath us, is that, we have a job to do while they're there to grow them. And then we should be, when we pass them off, somebody else should be receiving them ready to go, not having to cycle back and do the work that we should have been doing. So.
Good. And then also, obviously it's a business group. But we, Jordan and I were talking beforehand about during our little prep that this part of the verse is also interesting, which is that we are God's fellow workers, and you are God's field and God's building. So if you apply that to either to a ministry organization, which is what this would have been, or if you would apply it to a business, is that the products are important. Hilti builds great things, and those are very important, and of course your customer list is important, but really your business or your ministry organization is made up of people. The people are the field, the people are really the building, and so that I just thought that was useful as well. Anybody else have any thoughts about this for employee development or employee metrics or servant leadership? Okay. So Maybe I'll leave that up in case you guys have questions later. No particular order. The next one, I'll read it for no particular reason. Ecclesiastes 4, 9 through 12. Two are better than one because they have a good reward for their toil. For if they fall, one will lift up his fellow. But woe to him who is alone when he falls and has not another to lift him up. Again, if two lie together, they keep warm. How can one keep warm alone? And though a man might prevail against one who is alone, two will withstand him. And a threefold, this is a very famous part of the verse actually, a threefold cord is not broken. And so this kind of goes to when you talk about growth and leadership, and you talk about teams and personal development too, all those are very, as Jordan likes to say, all those topics travel really well between one another. But that approach is that, everybody has different strengths. And everybody leverages those strengths, just like we are God's field and God's building. Together we're stronger as well. Anybody else have any thoughts? I think, Jordan, you kind of spoke to you a little bit.
Yeah, there's another one. This one's in my emails. That's in my.
Oh, wow. Okay.
It's in my signature. Just that verse 9. Two are better than one because they have a good return on their labor. So it's just that constant reminder that in business, it's a good thing that we're doing business together, because if I'm doing business with you and you're doing business with me, we're going to have a good reward. Now, again, there's always that verse in, I think it's in Micah where it talks about, two individuals need to walk the same way, otherwise they fall down. And so, yes, we need to be in accord, but for the business purpose, I can't think of a better one about, we're walking together. Two are better than one. Amplified says, because they have a good, more satisfying reward for their labor, which means that you can have a reward if you do it on your own. It's just not as satisfying as if you do it together. So,
right.
I also like the part, verse 10, where they say if one falls, then one will lift up his fellow. That just reminds me of like fellowship, and also of building relationships within the business. It's not only about the business itself, but it's building those relationships. If you fall down once again, you may have another business partner or even other businesses that may even send business to you if maybe you're hurting. So once again, it's all about that relationship.
Good. Are you a good networker?
Who, me?
Yeah. Would you consider yourself a good networker, or is it an area of focus?
Yeah, I would say above average, considering I would probably speak with 100 people on average, if not more. So I would.
I would say I'm probably best average.
At building pretty good relationships with people. So
yeah. Jordan's good at it too. Yeah, I would say it's not one of my core strengths. I love people. I have a interesting predisposition to liking people in general, but I don't necessarily, I'm not great at networking and you know what I mean? For me, I'm an introvert, so for me, it's a little more work to do that, just to make myself go do that kind of thing. I'm happy to do it right now for my job search, and it's definitely taking some out of me. But I do I do appreciate people who have that gift for sure. And I think this verse is where they can really make some hay for sure. And then this one is very complimentary in general. Dustin, you want to read that?
Yeah, Hebrews 10:24, and let us consider how to stir up one another to love and good works.
Yeah, and this goes right into a section that Jordan is going to cover tonight. And we want to keep it interactive, but we do have some nice material I think both of us are pretty excited to get into, which would be very spiritual, but very business, heavy business too. What's nice about this group is that we can really have that fusion, where we can sort of be exposed to different business topics and yet also in that spiritual way. But I like this one because it talks a lot about frankly, some of the things we just said with networking, helping each other. But then I think it also talks about the servant leadership stuff, which Jordan's going to dive into real well.
Howie, can I read this scripture out of the Passion Translation?
Yeah, rock on.
So actually, I actually did a totally separate podcast on just this scripture last week, just because it touched me so strong. But it says, discover creative ways to encourage others and to motivate them toward acts of compassion, doing beautiful works as expressions of love. So.
I like the discover creative ways to encourage one another. I like that.
That's
yeah,
cool.
Me too.
Looking outside the box.
Nice.
Yeah.
Good. Love it. Cool. Well, I think we'll dive into some of the content that we've gone over. I kind of go back and forth on whether or not to just share notes like this. And I don't know where I'm going to land on it. Jordan may have an opinion. So we'll work it out over time. But anyway, the title that we kind of farted around with, and we're going to do a podcast after our group tonight as well. But it's definitely around meaningful metrics. So we've done about tonight will be 5 podcasts on meaningful metrics. It's been a neat little podcast series. And when it intersects with the week that this group happens, it's been also a topic that we've covered here. But the employee metrics was one that Jordan suggested, because I thought we were done last week with savings metrics for how to save in your business. And he came up with this one. So I think he's going to cover this first couple little areas.
Yeah, so we want to jump in. We wanted to give you guys a little bit of a statistic on employee engagement. Now, employee engagement is a hot button, and I was telling Howie earlier, it's actually a service that a lot of businesses sell, that we can increase your employee engagement, so it's no longer something that's passive, that's in the background. Businesses, we have to focus on, if you're in a role of manager or leader or of any capacity, you're focusing on the engagement of your employees. And if you're the employee, that engagement carries a lot of weight, that my voice, if I so choose to use it, is very powerful. So just want to give you a couple stats. So it says employee engagement is the extent to which employees feel passionate about their jobs, are committed to the organization, and put discretionary effort into their work. 29% are engaged, they're loyal and psychologically committed, more productive, and higher in retention. 52% of employees are productive, but they are not psychologically connected to their company. They miss more work days and are more likely to leave. And then 19% are actively disengaged, physically present, but psychologically absent. They are unhappy and insist on sharing this unhappiness with others. And the great quote is, we're all in the same boat, but with different engagements. So I know that even with, the current pandemic, wherever you sit on that metric, that was a lot of things as people say, we're all in the same boat. You can be in the same boat and be on total opposite ends and not even be relevant with each other. And so obviously the follow-up, some drive the boat and some are jumping off the boat. And so,
Paul, you were resonating with that. Dive in.
Yeah, actually this resonates a lot, because I have heard statistics about 73% of people being disengaged. So this breakdown actually makes sense. It is very, very true. I've heard about this, the topic in the past, and I have lived it as well. So, and I think from a Christian's perspective, I mean, obviously, it's very good to be engaged. That should be our goal. But from a Christianity perspective, it's also kind of a expectation from God to be engaged, because that makes us to be good stewards. Good stewards is also about being very mindful what the God has entrusted to you, so to us. So our job is part of that, you know. Our business is part of that. So it's the way, if we are engaged there, we're making commitment. We're making the business or our work grow. So that means that we're engaged. So as Christian, we should definitely be on this side of the boat, that we are actually moving it forward.
So good. So good.
Very
So, we have human resources departments, right? So, Dustin, isn't this the HR manager's job to make sure that every employee in the company is engaged? Isn't it their fault if people are not engaged?
Uh, what is the job description of a HR manager? That's what I want to know. Like, what do they do? That's my question, because the
Well, they
majority
do a
of the
lot.
HR people that I know do a lot of back office stuff, right?
Yeah, and I'm being sarcastic because my point is that, it's not the HR person's job to
Right.
make sure I'm engaged, And to Paul's point, as a believer in the workplace, it is my job to work as into the Lord. It's not the HR manager's, role to make sure I'm motivated and that I care. I ought to care. And I will be honest with all of you that there's been jobs, including my last job, where there were moments where I had a low point, and maybe I was discouraged, so it came across like I didn't care. But for me, it's usually I do care, but I might be discouraged. Um, but there's other jobs where I've had times. I remember when I was at McAfee for a period of time, I was, a little. I had times where I was kind of down, or again, I doubt that it was that I wasn't liking it or that I wasn't engaged really, but it would come across as I was not engaged because maybe I was discouraged or something, right? And so it's not my job. So I didn't like point fingers at my boss or at HR and say it's your job to motivate me, right? I would take that matter to the Lord and I would pray about it, and He would help me with my heart. And there's a concept that I talk to my children about, which is praying for your heart. And we can all do that and say, Lord, I can't change my heart. I'm discouraged, or maybe I am bored, right? Some personalities might have that. I can see that. So help me to be engaged. But on the flip side, a manager can't point the finger at an HR person and say, well, it's your job. Employee engagement is an HR thing. And it's in the category of an HR, a human resources kind of thing. But HR cannot possibly be in everybody's department and making sure that the quality of work and the quality of life and growth and all the things that Jordan's going to talk about are happening. That has to happen at departmental manager level. So that's the marriage, I think, of making this work. It's from a spiritual perspective, it's at me engaging God so that I can be engaged. And from a managerial perspective, it's it's me, all of us as managers engaging our teams and meeting them where they're at to make sure that they can be engaged because they have a good, healthy culture. It's just my opinion.
Yep.
Cool. Well, there's strategies, tools, and like Jordan was saying, there's whole businesses around this. One of them is, that I looked at a couple of them, but you can Google this for, all day. But surveys was one way to get a heartbeat of how things are going. My company that just laid me off, I give them credit because they did an employee survey several weeks ago to see how everybody was doing. And so I thought that was very commendable that they did that. The other one that Jordan and I talked about in our prep was as leaders, focus on listening. And having a one-on-one session is a great way to do active listening. And you schedule time. If you're an employee, you schedule time with your boss, and you share what you're seeing, share what you're thinking, share your ideas, that kind of thing. But hopefully, they are occasionally having a one-on-one with you where you can have a session. You're not having to schedule with them. Hopefully, it's happening sometimes. But having an open-ended time to share between manager and team member is a really good idea. When I was at New Relic, I even scheduled, I actually forgot that I did this, but I saw this in some old notes from, because I've been doing all this interviewing, so I'm having to look at a lot of old notes. And apparently I scheduled a sales cross-functional time of sharing to support one another. So it's basically a bunch of sales reps getting on a phone call every week on a Friday or whatever it was for half an hour, just to share how we're feeling and what's working, maybe what's not working. There's opportunities to have that sharing and listening to support each other, which will help everybody's engagement. And then I think then you get, Jordan, I think at that point, whether it's manager to employee or setting up an internal, so Paul could set up for DevOps, just an internal cross-functional call where they're just having a support, they're just supporting each other and sharing, I think there's a lot of creativity you can put behind this topic.
Yeah, my big thing is follow up, and what I've seen in working in the various sizes of companies, that I've worked at, from working at a very, very large hospital group and chain down to some smaller, is employee engagement comes all the way back to, surveys and things like that. You can do all the surveys you want. You can ask all the questions you want. But if you're not going to do anything about it, stop asking me, And so that's one thing that I know a lot of companies fail at.
Wow, that's good.
Is they ask a lot. They pummel their employees with surveys. They pummel them, give me feedback. And then there's just nothing that's done. And then what happens is the employees are just saying, stop asking me. I'm done engaging. I'm checked out. I'm going to jump in that 52%. I'm going to show up to work because I need to get paid, but stop trying to fix the problem because you guys aren't doing it. Just stop bugging me. That's the fine line that you can walk. You can keep asking your employees, but you got to be willing to do something. Just like we talked about several times in feedback. You need to ask for it, but you got to be willing to receive it and act on it.
Awesome.
Paul, you seemed to smile when I talked about that.
Here we go. You're busted.
No. I'm just reacting. Not at the moment. No, I think it's good. It's good stuff.
Yeah. So
there's a lot of options. So it's funny. You guys have heard us talk about this before, but what if you're? So actually, I'm going to spit this over to Jordan right now because I know we're just going to go with it. But what if I'm not a manager?
Yeah.
Softball. So Jordan, like what, all these things sound great, but what if I'm not a manager? I mean, what can I do?
Yeah, we also have our role. I mean, like Paul talked about, we're still faith-based believers. And so we didn't pull the scripture, but we should be doing our work as unto the Lord, not for man. So that's first and foremost. But again, part of it is there's a lot of disengaged employees because they don't feel like their work necessarily is involved in the overall purpose. And so you got to get them locked in. That's how you get engaged, that your daily tasks matter, but then for me as an individual, it's a choice each and every day if I'm going to be engaged or if I'm not going to be engaged. It might, whether this is a career or a calling, I know we've talked about that too. It's really irrelevant because it's what is the purpose of me going to work? What's my goal when I'm there? And so I should be living and acting in a certain way. So.
And I think that verse that you shared with us, which is so good, also applies. If I'm not a manager, I can sure look for creative ways to encourage others.
Yes.
And the Passion Translation is such a good one here. And to motivate them, toward acts of compassion, doing beautiful works as expressions of love. So I have a lot of ways. I mean, it's interesting because you say, well, I'm not in the mission field. And I would say back to you, I think I need to challenge. I don't want to even say you. I'm just going to challenge Brian. I'm going to just, because as I look at new jobs, Jordan has been inspiring me tonight in our prep. Because I was telling my wife Jamie all these ideas of things I wanted to do if I got this one particular job. And because I gave her like 7 things, just like spitfire, like just all the stuff I got excited about. And Jordan has given me another layer. And it kind of broke me up, actually. Kind of, I don't know if you could tell, it kind of choked me up a little bit when you saw me earlier. But it made me really happy to say, wow, there's this other dimension where I can think about this verse that's on your screen, right? And which you shared with us, and how I could have that impact on a non-business level every single day. And I'm not on the mission field, and yet maybe I can challenge myself that I kind of am. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And so that's a transformative. I mean, I'll take, kind of my personal goal. I don't know what yours is, Jordan. My goal is that people usually have 2 things they can take out of this. That's one of mine for tonight, for sure.
Go back to that graph. So,
okay. Yep.
So it's one of the ones that as the leader is the most frustrating. So it talks about the 29% that are actively engaged. They're rowing the boat the way you want them to row it. They're loyal and psychologically committed, more productive and have a higher retention. It doesn't say anything about them vocally trying to get other people to get them to move to their side of the ship. But you get the 19%, and that's one of the things. They are unhappy and insist on sharing that unhappiness with others. As an employee, we have we can fight that 19%. We can come back that as that 29. We should be saying, this is awesome. This is how I'm engaged. This is how you can get engaged. And, I may not be a supervisor or manager by title or by pay, but I can sure as heck walk in the room and have other people pay attention, because that 19%, they're not getting paid that way. People are following that lead just as much as they're not following the 29%.
Well, that puts it into a much more proactive mentality too. I love that. And I hadn't thought about trying to convert some of these guys. It's a really good idea, because these guys are trying to convert them. But I hadn't thought of these guys trying to convert some of these, because the ones on the tippy edge, especially, they might just be hurting. You get into here, they might get more cynical for sure, but probably half of them might be flippable in the right situation, and I can have that impact on them. And I might just not change a company, I might just change a life.
Yeah. Sure.
Right. Really good.
Yeah. Or you can just, I know, and Dustin knows this, because, I'm an Enneagram 8, and, which means that I will challenge certain circumstances or individuals, but, I can actively challenge those who are actively disengaged, and maybe I'm not getting them to be the non-engaged, but what I'm doing is I'm keeping them quiet, So if I can just get you to not rock the boat, you don't have to be engaged. Just stop rocking the boat,
Yeah, right.
John Maxwell talks about it all the time. Do I want to move somebody who's somebody or a character trait, it's a 7 and they're comfortable at being a 7. They're not going to move to an 8. So should I focus a lot of attention trying to get that thing from a 7 to an 8, or can I go get a 2 and move it to a 5? Maybe there's a vocal leader who's down there and actively disengaged, and I can just go rally around him and just put my arm around and say, you're not going to wreck this team. And so I'm just making it my priority. So, but it takes certain personalities to do that. But we can move right into employee strengths and growth, which is kind of the heavy meat that we were going to discuss today. I was again, in our prep, I do a lot of these leadership devotionals, and this one came out of a leader devotional. Do we get it? From Robert Greenleaf, from his book, The Servant as Leader. And so these are 3 questions that I just want to prompt us as a group, and we're going to discuss a little bit more. So the first question is, do those served, so as me as a leader, I'm serving my team, do those served grow as people while they're working for me? That's a positive. It needs to be a yes or a no. And we're going to get to what the outcome is of this. So it's a question that as a leader, which we all are in some capacity, so we're all leaders of our families. Okay. We all have a family on here. So, I mean, we could take that straight from business to our family to make it more relevant if we need to. But do those grow as people while they're underneath me? Question number 2, what is the effect on the least privileged in the company, organization, in your family? What is the effect on that person? And will they benefit or at least not be further deprived under my leadership? That makes sense to everybody? Shake a head, yes? Okay. So under my leadership, the person is lowest on the total pole. Or is situation getting worse or is it getting better for them underneath my leadership? Okay. And then the question number 3, the most important one, is do your team members, while they are working for you, do they become healthier, wiser, freer, more autonomous, and more likely to become a servant leader? If the answer is yes to all of those, then you are a servant leader. If the answer to any one of those is no, then it just means you're not a servant leader at this moment. That's what Robert Greenleaf's book talks about, is that this is again, you've heard me talk about filter. This is the filter to, am I a servant leader? Now, if the question is, why do I want to be a servant leader? And again, the best example of it is, and again, dealing with a little bit by faith-based, is Jesus. Jesus was a servant leader. It's very clear. He didn't come to be served, but to serve. That's in Mark 10:42 through 45. We don't have time to pull that up, but that's really where the basis of all this comes from. And so as a leader, we should be serving our team. And that's my biggest focus, is that, are those underneath me growing, or is just the business growing? Is my business and sales skyrocketing, but people are getting divorced underneath my watch? Are they missing their kids' baseball games because they're just so focused on sales? I'm not growing and cultivating them and engaging them like I should. I'm not helping them determine priorities. I'm setting a poor example probably in that instance, that work is more important, and that's not the case. That makes sense? So Howie and I discussed, and we always talk about, as a leader, our goal is to cultivate those underneath us, but it's not to cultivate them to a point to where they have to stay with us. We should cultivate them to a point to where they are sought out by others, but we have engaged them in such a way that they may choose to stay. They can go someplace else, and they probably should, to continue their growth. But because of our engagement, because of the work that we put in, they want to stay. Maybe it's less money. Maybe they're not in that managerial role. But because of the effort and the work we put in, there's a commitment. Just like that, what was it, the 29% on the front end? They're committed, right? They're still in the front of the boat. They're not leaders. They're not managers, but they're still committed. And that's where we should be, Any thoughts?
It's good. No, I think it adds a lot of purpose to us, in our workplace, and it adds just so much more richness and depth into everything that we can do.
And so really
adds a vision for what you can do.
Yeah. And so the metric, because again, we want to talk about the numbers, the metric that you're going back and checking is maybe you're setting these personalized objectives. When people are hired on and you're having your team meetings, you're getting to know your staff. Okay. Day one, how many people are in relationships? How many people have kids? And you're cataloging this information. Well, after 6 months or a year, are these relationships that they have down the line, are they better or worse? And so that was an example I gave. And I know several companies that do focus on that. Are my team members getting divorced? If that's the case, then I, as a leader, I have a direct responsibility to speak into that.
It's really, you wouldn't think that your manager at work would have that big of an impact on you. But actually, I have two anecdotes. One of the anecdotes is kind of famous saying that you guys have probably seen on LinkedIn and elsewhere, which is that people join companies but leave bosses. And there's a lot of truth to that because your boss can make your life really miserable. So people join companies but leave bosses. The other one that I heard yesterday, this is a little hard to share, but a friend of mine has a small consulting company, and both him and I worked for a medical scanning tech company. We did a little bit of work for them. I ended up not getting the deal from them, but he got his part of it, which is great. But that CIO for that particular medical scanning company was real toxic. It was really hard to work with and was really toxic. And I didn't hear this until yesterday, but apparently two of that CIO's employees committed suicide. So you want to talk about becoming healthier or less healthy, and you're like, what impact can I have? Apparently pretty big. I could never have dreamed. I just heard that yesterday. I would never have dreamed that this guy was that bad. I knew he was a mess. I didn't realize he was that big of a mess. But anyway, yeah, as a leader at work, you can have a huge impact on someone else. And even if you're not a direct manager or supervisor right now, you can start to act like one, and you can start to lift other people up, and you can start to treat like your mission field, because normally it's not that extreme. You're not going to save a life over it, but you could certainly help a marriage, you can help a relationship, you might save a life, but you can certainly consider it a mission field. So I'm really glad you're pulling out all these principles of servant leadership and making a difference, because I learned the hard way yesterday afternoon just how critical that actually can be.
Yeah, I mean, that is definitely a hard, very blunt, example of the effect that managers, supervisors, leaders have on their teams. I mean, again, most of us spend a minimum of 40 hours a week at our jobs, and that's probably more direct time than we spend with, our loved ones and things like that. And so there is a lot that we have the capabilities to do. And so, again, there's just more metrics that you can, how many people are staying, how many of your peers are choosing to leave versus, being promoted or fired. These are all just examples of metrics that we can track and you should track. We talked about that in every episode, the previous 4 episodes. Are you tracking stuff? That's question number 1. So if we're not doing this, we need to start. And then number 2 is, how are we going to use it? And it's a powerful tool. These metrics are powerful tools to use personally for yourself, but to grow your team in a mighty way.
Good stuff. Who would like to add a comment or a thought to that section?
So I think those statements takes the servant leader concept to another level. I mean, it just makes me realize how much work do I need to do. Yeah, because I have in the agile world, a scrum master is recognized as a servant leader. This is not a new topic for me, but I mean, what I'm seeing in this concept is actually the bar has been raised. Because in my work, I mean, I do not. I mean, a Scrum Master is not above anybody on the team. However, the role is at the end of the day is of leadership. Is a person who is a master not of a team, but is a master at encouraging, enabling, energizing people, help the team to get to their full potential.
Hmm.
So I mean that's essentially my work, but definitely what I'm seeing here is, and I actually even Googled this author, so I'm gonna read this book because it's definitely eye-opening.
That's awesome. Well, that's neat to hear that you have some direct possibilities of using this, and that this is part of your role, actually.
Yep, definitely. And even the Agile Manifesto has one specific item that it's related to this, and that literally reads, build projects around motivated individuals, give them the environment and support they need, and trust them to get the job done. So that's one principle of the Agile Manifesto, and it's all around this. And it's even is in line with the Bible verse, the last Bible verse in Hebrews. Was it in?
Yeah, they
10:20.
encourage together. Yeah,
Yes,
yeah,
Hebrews 10. Yeah. So yeah, it's definitely something that
that's so cool.
resonates a lot and makes me, you know, think that I have a lot work to do.
That's awesome. So
Thank you
valuable.
for sharing this.
Thank you for unpacking such a relevant business example. Powerful. Well, I think alongside of that, we wanted to talk a little bit about, so obviously when you talk about meaningful metrics and you talk about employee and you talk about team metrics and those kinds of things, people are kind of squishy. So it's not like here's a pallet and I've got 12 stacked computers on the pallet. I can easily count those assets, and we should count those assets, but people are more dynamic and they're more dimensional than that, and so they're harder to sort of to track. But one of the things that people are doing is they're using personality tests, they're using personality assessments and that kind of thing. So we thought we'd talk for a minute a little bit about that, about our experience with that. I'm going to talk about the first one, and Jordan will talk about the second one. And then if you guys have anything to add to that, then by all means do that. The Strength Finders, I've actually been to the Strength Finders conference last year. It was really good. And I've had the Strength Finders test. I've had my oldest daughter take it, my wife take it, and we've used that in my last job quite a bit. Strength Finders is, you basically there's 38 personality traits, and you rank them from like 1 to 38. But most people focus on their top 5. And so, like my top 5 are responsibility, connectedness, positivity, belief, and discipline. I have them framed on my desk here. And so those are just mine. And then I have, an Enneagram number as well, which happens to be Enneagram number 1. But the way we used Strength Finders in my last job was we did it during hiring. We had people, everybody who wanted to interview with us took the Strength Finders test, and we talked about their 5 top strengths during the interview process. And it was a great icebreaker to get to know them. We got to ask them, why is futuristic your number 1 strength? How do you use that? What do you like about being futuristic? That kind of thing. Or whatever the strength might be. So hiring analysis, we used them in coaching sessions where I would meet with team members and talk about their strengths. I did it one time. I was going to do it again, but I don't work there anymore. But basically, I'd sit with them and talk about the top 5 strengths in a half-an-hour session. Sometimes it'd go to 45 minutes, and I would just, work with them and try to, work on what they're good at and not worry as much about what they're not good at. And then encouragement, we actually framed, just like I have it framed on my desk. This is the one from my office, but everybody got to have it framed, their top 5 strengths on their desk. And so they got to pick their frame, and it looks nice. And then when I walk up to talk to Amy or Jennifer or to Quentin or whoever, I'm trying to relate to them through strengths. So that way I get to celebrate them, and I get to really engage with them on things that they're interested in, because people are interested in themselves. And it was a neat initiative that we did across the office. Anyway, that's Finders, and that's a couple of practical ideas of how to use that in business. Enneagram is, I know Gateway, I think, uses Enneagram, by the way, I believe, but I don't know as much about it. So Jordan wanted to share about Enneagram.
Yeah. While I do enjoy strength finders, I've used that multiple different facets in business and relationships, and I am a firm believer of it. I don't like how the strength finders only focuses on strengths. Yes, it's important, and yes, we want to celebrate those. But Enneagram, what I thoroughly enjoy about Enneagram is that it defines weak areas. So not only does it point out strengths, it specifically points out negative attributes or weak areas of the individual. And now what it does is those are just weak areas. And so what it's supposed to do is that if the person is self-aware, then whenever that instance comes up, it's a aha moment. I'm going down the wrong path. I need to turn the opposite way and go away from this. And so, and again, if you're doing that as a team, and you can gently nudge an individual and say, hey, you're not being empathetic in this environment. You know that, you can point that out. But hey, you're lacking empathy right here, which means that you're probably not using your strengths. Use your strengths, and that's I'm saying that because that's me. So for me, I contend I'm an Enneagram 8. So my definition is a challenger. For me, it's a lot of times it's difficult for me to be empathetic. And so the way I do it is I forcefully put it in my life to where I don't have a way around it. So I don't have the option to lack the empathy just because I put it there. All of you guys receive a text message from me once a week. And in that message, it comes across my empathy that I have for you and your situation. But I put it there on purpose. And I put it there with a cost and accountability to me to keep me on the healthy side. And so what happens is, as I've actually had it where I've missed or I've been a little late and I've had somebody send me a message, hey, are you good? Because you haven't sent me anything yet, and not because they needed it, but they're holding me accountable. And I was like, yeah, I've just had a really busy day. Sorry about that. But I was right on point, but that's what it's meant to do. And I like that from the aspect of team building, especially as the closer you get with brothers or with your team. It's more of a small niche thing. You can't do it across a big perspective because you don't want to call people out.
It's good. Sounds like a really good one.
I encourage you to do it. And I'd love, whether you're, obviously Dustin and Howie have talked to you, but Paul, if you haven't, or anybody who's listening in, you can always message Howie or myself and we'd have a conversation on that.
My daughter talks about, this wing, that. Do you know about, there's something like wings or something?
I do, yeah. So everybody has a defined type. So there's 9 types.
Okay.
I can read them off. I have them pulled up here for our group, so we can just. So there is the reformer, number 1, the helper, the achiever, the individualist, number 5, the investigator, 6, the loyalist, the enthusiast, number 8, the challenger, and number 9, the peacemaker. So everybody has an individual one where they are at their highest. Now, you have wings because you have a healthy wing and you have an unhealthy wing. And so what happens is, that's where I was talking about. I know that if I'm healthy, then I'm an 8 because I can't change that. That's who I am. That's my personality. It's my characteristics. But I know that when I'm healthy, I'm leaning towards empathy. I'm leaning this way, which is not natural for me. But I know that if I'm not healthy, I'm leaning away from empathy. I'm leaning towards being solo, being by myself. And those are your wings. Now it keeps going because the Enneagram what happens is everybody has all 9 characteristics inside of them.
Okay.
And so you can, you may be 90 something percent. I may be 90% a challenger, but I could be lots of little percentages. So that's where the wings come into play.
Okay.
It can get as deep as you want to, but really the main thing is just know this is where my base is, whether you're a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And then You need to know which way is unhealthy and which way is healthy, and then just put obstacles in your way that force you healthy. And then obviously accountability to maintain those is obviously a big deal.
Thank you. That was, and I think mine was free. Oh, maybe not. It might have cost
Yep.
a couple bucks.
No,
I don't know.
Enneagram, yeah, there's plenty of free Enneagram tests if you
Okay.
want.
Oh yeah, there's
Yeah.
plenty of free ones.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, less than 5 minutes and results are pretty clear. Plus, there's a lot of great YouTube faith-based and non-faith-based
point.
that talk about it, that go in depth, that can give you maybe non-faith-based celebrities that are different types, and so maybe you relate differently. For faith-based, they'll give you biblical characters. That way, you know, you can kind of get that deeper revelation. So.
And with both of these programs, you can get certified if you like the idea of becoming a coach. They're not cheap, but there are programs to get certified to become a coach for both of these. By the way, the guy who counsels me on Friday mornings, him and his wife are both getting Enneagram. Well, they were at one point. I don't know. I haven't asked. But they were going through Enneagram certification training to become coaches. And I know Strength Finders has a whole program around that too. And like Jordan said, there are really good YouTube videos about both of these programs. I need to spend more time on the one so I can learn more about how I tick, and probably should learn about my wings, some of the negative stuff too. But I have looked at some of them and they were pretty good. And he's right. I have seen that there's some faith-based ones. I haven't, like I said, I haven't looked at enough of those yet. But yeah, anyway, good resources there. And then I think the last thing, oh, by the way, actually, sorry, we should pause and just interact too. So who wants to dive in and talk a little bit about maybe something that spoke to you, or you have an idea or resource or whatever you want to talk about?
Well, I can actually speak about the Enneagram when I started doing that. The whole concept of what is healthy and unhealthy makes you more aware of being more self-aware of where you're truly at. Like for me, I believe I'm an Enneagram 5, so for me, I'm better when I'm doing presentations, when I'm engaging people. And then if I'm not, I'm by myself, I'm recluse. And so those things I'm able to identify, and then I can see where I'm lacking, or how I can push myself to just get better at what God's already put in me. So I'm an investigator.
This is you? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can see that.
So I'm perceptive. At times I am isolated, but I work best when I do presentations, when I speak with people. Even though naturally I don't want to do that, I'm better at when I do push myself to do that. So like consulting, coaching, that's really where I feel comfortable at. But I have to make sure also where I'm competent in those areas. If I'm not confident, that's when it kind of falls off for me.
Sorry, can you say that again? The last sentence only?
What's competency?
Yeah, I couldn't hear the word. So are you saying confident, like you have confidence, or
Confident.
competence?
Competence, like
Okay.
Yeah.
Knowledge
yeah.
in that area.
A 5, an Enneagram 5, which is what Dustin's talking about, their basic fear is being useless, helpless, or incapable.
Okay.
Because they want to be wise in that area, but if I feel like I'm wise and I have a wealth of information, but nobody wants to hear it, that's a fear. I want to be able to impart the wisdom.
Okay.
Right. So that's why, for me, I love to research things like with a vengeance. Like if I find something, ask Jordan. I know more about fishing now than I've ever known about in my lifetime within the past couple months. Right? It's just because I love researching. I love to be confident. I love to be able to share that information, but also converse with people that already do it.
Okay. Very interesting. If I gave you a project, let me ask you this. Okay, so let's say you came to work for me and I said I wanted you to help me learn about this new software for sales enablement. Making this up. I'm just making this up. Just curious. Just curious how this works. Although I actually do need help with that. But if I, and you would be paid. But let's say you're not interested in that. Would your motivation still be there, or do you have to be interested to get all researchy like this?
No, my motivation is purely, I would say, right now, it's because of my personal interest. But if it were my job, I would be interested because of my job. Because
So you
that
have
would be
enough
purpose.
responsibility.
Yeah, that would be a responsibility because that's
Okay.
actually one of my Strength Finder's strengths is responsibility.
Oh, okay, good.
So if somebody
That's
gives
one of
me
mine too.
responsibility to say, hey, I need you to research this, despite
Okay.
if I like the area or not, I will research it because once again, that is my strength. That's what I
Well,
do.
that's attractive as an employer. That's an attractive thing. Is that we need people that will help us figure things out and document them, and then absolutely go teach us and have a session where we're learning. I'm sure
Now,
Paul.
at the same point though,
Yeah.
if nobody's asking me to research things,
Right.
then I don't feel very comfortable because that's
Well,
what I'm here to do.
Yeah.
my suggestion, and this is not a coaching session, and I am no coach, but my suggestion, it's just an idea. I have had this idea. I have some evidence from Lowe's store. I like Lowe's, but I have some evidence that would help them. And I thought about doing a little research report for them. It's just hard to justify that many hours to do a nice report for them, to give them some suggestions. But I have like screenshots of examples. And I could easily do an ROI thing for them and all that. But I think what you could do is and I know this is not about Enneagram, but just because I had the idea, you could, for your company, come up with something that you see as a pain point and do some work on that, and then schedule a briefing.
Yeah.
Because if it's a legit, it's insights. Exactly. Anyway, just an idea. Paul, you should take it. I mean, no pressure, but
Definitely. I'm going to take it. I already have the website, so.
Yeah, awesome. Well, maybe next time you can share what you find out.
Yeah, but I could see some of the things in what you just talked, Dustin, about the investigator. I could see I usually tend to, like, before I speak on a given topic, I'm not going to speak of something that I don't know about. Some people are very natural, like they have a pretty good understanding or something, but I need to be sure, in order for me to share it, because it's something that
as far as employee engagement, do you understand, Paul, that what you're talking about right now, as a manager, makes me so happy because I can trust you and I can trust Dustin and I can give you a project and you're going to come back and it won't be perfect, but you're going to do your research and you're going to come back and you're going to present to me and to the team, and we're going to be smarter and equipped on an area where we needed help. And so it's like, I think you guys can both tell you can probably tell I'm resonating with this, is that we really need you in the body, right? We need you in the business and we need you in the body. Yep. People that are intelligent and can do that kind of work. And if they're not reaching out to tap you on the shoulder, then you may have to tap yourself on the shoulder and say, God has given me this gift and I can do something and I can be proactive and I can research a topic.
Yeah, and ultimately, the best groups are the ones that have as many different character types inside there. And so, I mean, Paul, you were talking about, as a leader. So if you can identify, your team and you can speak directly to their characteristics, you're going to engage them in a way that speaks directly to them. I know we've talked about that before, but, if I can I know I'm talking to, 3 people live, but however many people on recording. But if the more people that I can speak directly to their language, the more effective I am. And then whenever I call to action, they're all going to step up in their individual roles, and that's where, if I know myself and then I know my team, then I can just, Dustin, hey, this is where I need you to be. Howie, I need you over here. Paul, I need you over here. Everybody's in their same boat. Everybody's rowing at their own capacity, but we're all going the same direction because I'm speaking to you. And so, but then at the same time, if I know Dustin's off by himself, and I haven't given him a topic, then I know he's reading his own stuff, and I got to go engage him. Hey, man, you need to get over here. Otherwise, I'm going to lose him, Yep. Or if I'm not listening, if he keeps coming to me and I'm just blowing him up, I know he's going to, because he can't take it. He's going to have to go find somebody who's going to listen. So I'm going to have to go switch jobs. Not because I hate this job, because that person's not listening to me. And I got all this information. I got to get it out, But if I don't know that, if I think, man, this guy's just bugging me with all this stuff, that's not it. That's his value that he's trying to come across to me.
Good.
So
it's really good. Okay, so I thought that was very powerful and complementary to the last section. This is one of the richest gateway groups we've ever done, I think. The last thing I wanted to talk about is an area where I want to start off with a failure story. So employee productivity. Okay, so the last little red bullet down there. So employee productivity. We do have to, as managers and as leaders, and and I think as non-leaders, it's we're all leaders. We're all leaders. As Christians, we're all leaders. Period. But I think employee productivity is a great opportunity for us to start thinking about, for an individual role, there probably should be some metric, right? If I'm in sales, I mean, the most obvious metric is how much have they sold, right? So that's fine. But maybe the precursors to sales are things like meetings, right? Sales meetings with prospects. That might be something to have a metric around. Another one might be phone calls. That is not my favorite one in general for a lot of reasons. But meetings is real good. How many quotes have they done? Because a certain amount of your quotes, every 4 quotes or 5 quotes, statistically, you're going to get, actually. It's not a bad way of thinking about it. So having the metrics means that I can have a little bit of predictability about what my sales outcomes will be. But if you run a warehouse, which is a critical, obviously, part of the economy, what if you have a worker who is only loading 4 pallets an entire 8-hour day? And you're like, what are you doing the rest of the day, right? And maybe there's a legitimate reason they're only loading 4, which is because their supervisor is running them all over the place, cleaning and doing other things and not doing their core job, right? So, employee productivity doesn't have to be a toxic relationship where you're yelling at people. It better not be, or you're not going to be this, right? But employee productivity metrics are important so that we can make sure things are on track. In my last company, I got yelled at because somebody was working from home and she was a salesperson and she was only making 5 calls. And so I got yelled at like I'm incompetent. And I know I shouldn't have taken it that strongly. That was I worded that too strongly. But I got yelled at pretty badly because during this COVID pandemic, everybody's working from home, and I didn't have as close enough of a touch on some of my team members as I should have, because I'm not a naturally metric person. I'm not going to go check on you. You know what I mean? I'm more of the coach, the rah-rah, the teach you, the guide you, and the empower you. I'm not the check on you person, right? Now that I've been yelled at about it, I'm going to work on that in my next job. But yeah, so that's an area that I personally could have done better. And there's no excuse for that individual making 5 phone calls a day on a phone sales job. Got it? Makes sense? There's some irony there. Phone sales job, 5 a day, not a good math. At least do 1 an hour. I mean, come on. And that wouldn't even be good at all. But anyway, so employee productivity metrics are important for sure. Anybody have anything to add to that?
I have a question. What is HW?
Oh, that's just Howie.
Oh, okay.
That's just reminding me that I'm leading off, and then
Oh, okay,
whoever's
okay, okay, okay.
It's a
I
super
was just,
secret sales acronym.
yes, that was.
hardware. If you're selling hardware, highways. If you're building a highway, yeah. So it's just kind of a reminding of who's going to lead off for that particular topic. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think let me ask you this, from a Scrum Master standpoint, are there anything that you guys track?
Oh, yeah, I mean, but a lot of it is built on trust.
Okay.
I mean,
See,
obviously,
that's a little more how I'm wired.
yeah, it's
Didn't work out in this one little stupid situation that burned me, but normally it does work out. Trust usually works.
yeah, yeah, I mean, these teams usually strive to to have more, and what we call is business value. Is like in software development, I mean, some things are hard um, um, to tie to a specific return of investment. So, and like for instance, you have a website that gives you guidance on specification of probably how to buy a specific tool or the materials that this tool uses. I mean, that tool gives you the ability for a specifier to provide guidance. So that doesn't necessarily translate to a sale. However, the ability for this person to recommend healthy tools to a person who buys, that's what makes the sale. So in general terms, we do not tie everything to a return of investment, or we see the return of investment as intangible value that will eventually translate into, investments,
Okay,
meaning into return of investment.
that makes sense. Yeah, there's a lot of intangibles, to be honest. So you could over metric. I think everybody would probably agree on this. You could, if you want to be data driven on the one
Yeah,
hand on certain things, but I think we have to really be careful about what we track because it will affect behavior. So we have to think three-dimensionally a little bit about not only what we're going to track, but is that the metric? And also, what's the behavior if I start tracking that publicly? Am I going to modify behavior in a negative way? For
yeah.
example,
So
I've worked for inside sales companies before where people would start making fake phone calls to get their numbers up.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. So the moment that you put some not so meaningful metric that do not actually the employees do not actually believe they will be helpful for them, because the metric needs to make sense. It should resonate in you in such a way that, oh, I'm making progress. One of the things that is also that we embrace is failure. We embrace failure. I mean, it's okay if we fail. The thing is that what have we learned, and how can we apply this for the next time?
Hmm.
So if you enable that kind of mindset shift in the organization, then you have better chances of the employees to motivate these employees, again with the example at the beginning, like being more engaged, because I mean there's opportunity for failure. So I can try new things, I can learn and try new things without the worry that, oh, am I going to get fired if I don't deliver, because the failure is always an option.
It's good. Yeah, you guys might have heard the story of when New Coke came out in the 80s. There was a new flavor of Coke that was called New Coke. And it didn't go well, and the person who invented that was fired. But Coca-Cola actually rehired them later because they realized that was a terrible message to fire someone who tried to innovate and it didn't work out. And so what Paul is saying is so good because you don't want to have that fear. And if the metric that they're tracking you on is that it has to work, then why am I going to risk my job to innovate?
Exactly.
Good. Thank you so much for adding that. That gets me good. That gets me good. I thought you guys did construction. I didn't realize you guys made tools.
Oh yeah, it's unbelievable.
Wow, I like that. Huh. It's really cool. I even knew the logo. I knew everything, but I thought you did like actual construction. That's actually a tool.
Yeah, and mostly for construction companies,
Right.
like
So that's where the
regular user wouldn't, which by the way is, I mean, it's nothing wrong for the regular user. Actually, it's even better because it has, it's I would say I would compare Hilti with the Mercedes of the cars or the Apple of the computers.
Yeah, they're all safety compliant. Wow. You can see on all the tools what compliance safety rated they are.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Every tool comes with 20 years of warranty.
Wow, really? So can I ask you a question? Is there any effort at all to sell to Lowe's and Home Depot or direct?
The sales strategy, the Hilti sales strategy is direct sales. Okay. So that's why you don't see in Lowe's or Home Depot. Okay. And it's an expensive business model if you think about it.
Yeah.
But it's such a model that, I mean, that only, I mean, that's why not, it's not a cheap product. It's actually really expensive. Yeah. But the people who buys them they probably bought for life.
Okay. Wow, I'm so impressed.
That's like when working on cars. I spent $1,000 on wrenches on a wrench set, and then people ask, "Well, why do you spend so much?" Well, because they have a lifetime warranty. Wow. And when you're in the business, you have to have a different standard of your tools, right? You can't have a tool that is going to strip on you because it's made in China and it breaks when you're doing a really high-end job, and then all of a sudden, A, you either hurt yourself, or B, you break the product.
Yeah.
That can't happen. And so I can definitely see, where that is, because the majority of my tools were bought direct sales as well, because the quality of the product has to be above what your everyday person has to.
Yeah, for instance, they take that cordless tool that you're seeing there. The batteries, you can throw them from a 2-story building and still be okay. And if they are not, you can just go to the Hilti store and they'll change it.
Wow. Okay. That's impressive. Yay. Well, it's nice to know about this. Well, it's really nice to hear about your business a little bit, and thanks for giving us the great warning about not punishing failure. I thought that was absolutely critical, and I hope someone on the Gateway Group recording is blessed by that. I took more than my standard 2 things out of tonight, for sure.